David and Gizzelle, thank you so much for joining us for this podcast. We are excited to get started and dig into learning a whole lot more about urban assembly and the schools that you all have put together in New York and about the experiences. And this isn't the first time I've interviewed David. It's my first time getting to know Gizzelle, so we're going to spend a lot of time getting to know you. But it's not my first time interviewing David, and have had a lot of chance to talk to him. And David, as I hear you articulate what's going on with urban assembly and what your passion is, I hear you sort of describe the problem as, the public education space really doesn't always do a good job of engaging and taking advantage of what's in community. And that's really important if we're going to make sure young people have sort of a reality-based or a relevance-based education. And that's especially important for young people who are in the concern that we have about equity. If we're really concerned about equity, then this idea of really helping young people make meaning of their lives, their communities, and see how all this stuff fits together is so important. So if that's the big goal, and I just like to think all of that just comes down to this idea of meaning making. David, can you just tell us for a minute about why it is that you put those three things together and have come up with this magic mix of what you all call these urban assembly schools? How do they really dig in to help young people make meaning?
Well, Karen, first I got to say that any time that I get to spend with you, either virtually or in person, is a time that makes my day or even my week. So my week is officially made, and thank you for taking time to spend time with us here at the Urban Assembly and Gizzelle. You raise a really great point, right? This question of how do adult inputs into children's life prepare them to be ready for college, career, and community. And this notion of adult inputs, right? What kind of inputs do students need to be successful? And then who provides those inputs? So here at the Urban Assembly, as you mentioned, we have 23 schools across New York City. We work across the country to think about how to organize schools around these principles of social, emotional, academic development. But we've really focused on this idea of how do we maximize not only our school, but our community's input into young people. We were founded by Richard Kahn, and he was kind of the king back in the day, 1997, of this notion of private-public partnerships, right? How did the private sector and public sector work together in order to solve problems? And so one of the core ways that we've organized urban assembly schools have been with this notion that industry community has as much investment in schools as schools have in the industry and the community that they serve. You've mentioned before the work that we do around things like partnership coordinators, things like internships, and I know Gizzelle is going to talk about some of the work that she does and how the work that she does has better prepared her for school and how her school has better prepared for that world of work. So I'd say this, Karen, that when we understand that maximizing inputs into students by creating as many adults, caring, loving, knowledgeable adults as possible, then we will create an opportunity for our students to then give back of that input, of that investment into their community, into their college, into their careers, and then benefits all of our society.
Great words. I always love hearing you talk, David, but now I'm excited to turn to Gizzelle and say, great words, but how does this work? I mean, talk to us about the school that you're going to and why it feels different to you. How is it doing all the things that David just said?
I'll just start off by saying, first of all, like I said before, I'm so happy I went to Urban Assembly School. I'm proud that I'm proud to say that I soon to be a graduate from Urban Assembly School. They often tackle the mission to, like David mentioned, to just be there for all their students and be there to create a community and a sense of culture for urban. I believe that if you go to any other high school, you just don't get the same feel that urban culture creates with meaning, with empathy, and seeing just creating their students a whole sense of community and being there for each other and create, social awareness and being able to just like I said, be there for each other and, yeah.
What is that? Who's the we in that? When you say they do a great job of creating community, who is the we? Is it just your teachers? Is it something different about the students and how you all interact with each other? Is it other adults that are in the building? Is it the adults who are working with you? Who is this we that seems to be so important to what makes Urban Assembly School special?
It's definitely the staff in Urban Assembly. The staff helps create, the culture that I mentioned. They also bring people to Urban that also help create that culture. The staff, I'm sorry about the background noise. The staff bring other people to help create that culture, and also the staff kind of embed that culture, that urban culture, into their students whenever they, when their freshman year. We kind of create that by, having different clubs and different things that create that. So mainly the staff, the students, it's a mission that we all come together and do. It's not really people separately, it's just we all come together and create that culture together as one.
And Gizzelle, I noticed that you're very intentionally using the word the staff and not the teachers. And so often when I talk to students, they say the teachers. Who are the staff?
The staff can include the teachers. The staff includes just anybody who helps contribute to urban culture. It's not really a label I can put on anybody. It's just anybody who contributes to urban culture I can contribute them to staff.
And David, how do you make that happen? How do you get a staff that isn't just the classroom teachers, but has this common mission and is really working toward this common purpose? Is that intentional on your part?
Well, absolutely, Karen. So I think one of the things that Gizzelle is talking about here is having a common operating picture around the roles that adults should be playing in developing a sense of culture in our schools. And that means the deans, that means the teachers, that means the cafeteria workers. To the extent that we can, we want to create a sense of who we are, how we're modeling who we are, so that young people can see in the staff what are the attributes for solving problems that we want them to develop. Gizzelle, I believe, you work as well as this peer group connections, and the relationship between you and the underclassmen is that the senior classmen actually reproduce this notion of culture by directly mentoring and developing in their underclassmen some of these ideas of what does it mean to be an urban assembly student at the School for Collaborative Health. So it's an example of how these things are operationalized. People have a responsibility for developing these skills, attitudes, and culture that it means to be part of the school.
And Gizzelle, you mentioned that you're at a school that's focusing on health. How did you talk about what that means? What does that partnership mean? And how did you pick that school?
So my middle school, like I said, Lane was kind of my zone school. So when I was applying to Urban Assembly, that immediately popped up. But since Lane is such a huge campus, we have other schools in this school, and the other ones just didn't stand out to me. They offered different clubs, but it just wasn't the same clubs that Urban Assembly offered. For example, like I said, the medical field. My school offers 2 different medical fields, EMT and medical assistant. So your senior year, you get to choose whether you want to take EMT courses or medical assistant courses for free. And usually those courses cost a good amount of money, but we're taking them for free on your senior year. That when you graduate, you're graduating with a high school diploma and either your EMT certification or your medical assistant certification. So I'm doing my medical assistant certification this year, my senior year, and so far it's fantastic. I'm learning different things every single day. I'm learning how to draw blood, learning how to do EKGs, learning how to do blood pressure, pulse, height, your vital signs, and it's just a great program. It's just, I can't express how grateful I am for this, because also I know my mother was a part of medical assistant program as well, and she, expressed to me how grateful I should be for this, because she did this at a later age than I am now, and how she paid a lot of money to complete this program, and I'm doing this before my 18 years of age and free. And I'm glad I'm doing it with a teacher that I already have a relationship with, so I can express with her and confide in her, and being able to ask for help. It's not with somebody who I just met off a regular course. I already seen this teacher for 4 years almost, so I'm glad that I'm able to do this in Urban.
And David, how do you make these partnerships work? You mentioned earlier this idea of partnership coordinators. What is this partnership coordinator role, and how do you coordinate this kind of rich experiences for all of your students in different careers? Each of your schools has a different theme to it. How do you do this?
Well, first, I'm so proud of Gizzelle. Thank you, Gizzelle, for really articulating your experiences around the medical assistant pathway, as well as the opportunity around emergency management. The things that you talked about really form the core of the foundation of how we really thought about what the Urban Assembly is. Gizelle's school, the School for the Urban Assembly, Urban Assembly School for Collaborative Healthcare, is one of 7 career and technical education schools that we have here at the Urban Assembly. These career and technical education schools, as Gizzelle has said, prepare students to graduate with credentials based on work-based learning opportunities, internships, so that if they choose to, they can go directly into the world of work. They can use the skills, they can work in college, but they have been exposed to not just facts and figures, but the actual kind of challenges of being in the workplace, learning not just from books, but from experiences. And that's something that we really care about. And it goes to your question there, Karen, around the role partnership coordinators play. So Ms. Hamilton over at the Urban Assembly School for Collaborative Healthcare serves as the partnership coordinator. And one of her roles is to organize these industry partners. There's also a board whose job is to organize these industry partners to invest into the school, to invest into the kids, so that our children and our students are graduating with these kinds of experiences necessary. So I think it's a unique feature of the work that we do at the Urban Assembly, and it really reflects this notion of college, career, and community. As Gizzelle said, her mother went to the same school, right? And so this notion of like, how are we developing young people who not just pass the test of life, as Dr. Marisa Elias says, but are able to really take these skills and be effective in all that they do.
It's amazing that you've pulled this off. And I want both of you to talk. I mean, Gizzelle, you've already said just sort of how significant and important it is that you're coming out, not even 18 yet, with all these skills and all these experiences and just sort of ahead of the game from other high school students. How does that fit in to your commitment to really create equitable learning opportunities for the young people in your urban assembly schools? And why is it so important that we think about these kind of bold strategies when we talk about educational equity?
It's important to think about like with stuff like that when, well, like you said, I'm coming out of high school, with a certification, being a medical assistant, and with a high school diploma. So when coming out of high school, both of those things, I just, like I said, I feel grateful because I feel like I'm able to hold my own at a very young age. I'm able to have other skills that other students or other just individuals don't contain. I'm just, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think Gizzelle says something really important, right? Like, what is the role of exposure in teaching our youth that they have a responsibility to contribute to their community, right? So many people and young people go through school and they're just trying to find relevance. And Karen, you talked about this relevant-based education, right? Like, what does this mean to me? We've got bills to pay. We've got challenges in our home or in our community. There's a lot of things going on in young people's lives. And so when you give them opportunity and give folks like Gizzelle a space to say, like, I will graduate ready to contribute to my home, ready to contribute to my community, ready to give the skills that have been developed in me back to the folks who expect something from me. That's an identity, right? That's a shift in what we're asking of our young people. And whether Gizzelle goes straight off and does the medical assistant work or translates that into working directly in college and does this as part-time, she has a sense that, like, I've got something to contribute to the world. And in fact, every single young person, I know, Karen, you believe this, has something to contribute to the world. And our job as in public education is to uncover that, unleash that, and make sure that they know what those skills are.
It's really powerful, and I want to pick up on that point, David, and come back to you, Gizzelle. When we were sort of chatting earlier, you said, I may not go into this field, but it's really been important for me to do this. So when we talk about what this kind of real-world experience has done to make learning relevant for you, can you give us an example of why doing it this way and having these kind of real-world experiences is different from just sitting in a classroom? People often suggest, well, if you're going to have them go out and do that, you're shirking their academic training. How do you see these things fitting together? What makes this so relevant and makes you feel more prepared as you're ready to graduate?
Well, I feel like being in real world experiences just it prepares me for other things that other people don't really have the opportunity to do. Being straight into the field, having internships that I'm able to use my medical assistant skills on real people, real patients. It gives me a kind of glimpse of what I'm going to be able to do in the near future when I do have my certification. So, when my internship starts, when we're able to, go out and use our skills that we've been learning over the course of our 9-month certifications, it's fantastic in my opinion, because I just feel like, we're able to actually use all the material we learned and not just, embed it in our heads and just, say we learned it from straight books. No, we're actually using what we learned from class onto real people, because I believe if we just learn from straight books and just lectures, yes, we do learn, but you're not putting those skills into your work. When you put those skills into your actual work, you're able to, learn and make mistakes, which is okay, and you're able to be like, oh wait, I don't do that, you do this, and you're just able to use it properly, and you learn. And when you go over and do things over and over again on actual human beings, you just learn from your mistakes, and you're able to, grow.
Hey, Karen, can I pop in for that real quick?
Yeah, absolutely.
So Gizzelle says something that just really deeply resonates with me, right? In most places, when we want to develop young people or any people, when they make a mistake, we give them feedback and they correct themselves and then they do it again. Now, to be fair, Gizzelle, I hope that my arm is not the arm that you make too many mistakes on when you're drawing blood, right? But the goal is to develop mastery, right? The notion is not, you got a 70 on a test, good luck, maybe do better on your next test. It's like, how do I figure out how to get to the 90 or 85 that I'm trying to do so that I learn that skill? And that's how most learning happens in the real world, because we need people to do their work effectively. So I just really wanted to resonate with what Gizzelle is saying, because she talked about this notion of getting feedback, trying again, and moving to a mastery level that allows her to be effective in her role and her position with regards to the work that she's doing.
I just want to add on, if that's okay. Can I add on? I just want to add on, also having the urban assembly school also, give the opportunity to have an internship and go into different hospitals or urgent cares. That also helps greater our experience levels. That way, when we do graduate with our certification, we also have that under our belts to say, yeah, I have my certification, but I also have experience. That way, we can be able to get hired faster, and that way we could just be able to, say, yeah, I did this before, I did this on a real life person, not just because I took the certification test and I have my license. No, it's because I also have experience and I also being able to do it. Yeah.
I want to keep pushing in this, because I think there's a lot of intentionality to how you've set these experiences up and how you're making sure that these experiences are really meaningful and powerful and positive for Gizzelle and all the other students. So it's certainly possible that a young person could be going to a regular high school and then decide they want to find their own way to have an independent internship to work with a hospital or something. They could do that. But somehow you've intentionally put these things together, and presumably there's something about what that partnership coordinator is doing. There's something about the possibility of connection and conversation between the staff in the school and the staff who are in the hospital or the clinic. There's something going on there that really does mean that they're approaching working with Gizzelle and her peers in a different way, and that when those mistakes happen, they're helping her handle those in a different way. So I'm just assuming that there's more to this secret sauce that we could make not so secret.
Well, let me first just say the board at the Urban Assembly School for Collaborative Healthcare is outstanding. This is the Industry Partnership Board, and this board is the board that often helps to facilitate a lot of the relationships that we have with healthcare centers, prepares those healthcare centers with a sense of their mission vis-a-vis what we're trying to do in the K-12 space, and also works very closely with Ms. Hamilton to make sure that these are rich and meaningful partnerships that folks are having in the internships. Karen, you know that sometimes an internship is a place where students go and file a paper or get coffee, which is, there's places to learn and everything. You know me, I'll take anything. Everything is a learning experience. But that level of intentionality that you're talking about, it has to do with the relationships, but also having a sense that we are here to pour into our young people. We're here to make sure that folks like Gizzelle have a sense of how to solve problems in the social, emotional, and academic sense. Folks like Gizzelle communicate effectively, because we know that's such a huge part in the context of relationships in the medical field. And we just need to come to a common sense that we are successful when Gizzelle is successful. If she can come here and have a conversation with you, and she can go out into the world and have a conversation with her patients, then we're doing right by her, and we're doing right by our community.
You want to add anything to that, Gizzelle?
I'll just add that, well, first of all, what you just said was spot on. But I just want to add that, yeah, the internships and the medical assistant program helped me better communicate with, myself, others, and problem solve. Being able to do this is huge. And what really, makes me so happy that I'm a part of this is that my school is majority of Black and brown students. And the fact that Black and brown students have the opportunity to, uplift and prove other people wrong, and these minorities are able to, do things that others don't have the opportunity to, it just makes us look better as, minorities. So, yeah.
That's a wonderful point, and I know it's very intentionally a part of the mission of Urban Assembly. And I know, David, that you and others have also talked about just this broader responsibility to have not just your Urban Assembly partners who sort of have this kind of mission, but just you're on a mission to have adults in general realize that they have to model and practice and invite in young people into this space as learning partners and as relevant partners and as people who are there and committed to make change. So I'm just wondering, you've talked a lot, Gizzelle, about how much this has given you sort of confidence in these spaces that have been crafted for the internships, but does that transfer out into the community? Do you go out into the community more confident that you can work with other adults? Do you seek out other kinds of experiences that maybe weren't orchestrated by the school because of what you've learned and what you've been able to experience?
Yeah, so over the summer, actually, I had the opportunity to be a part of a program called Future of Tomorrow. The program basically taught me restorative justice skills, and those skills helped me, communicate with others and help me problem solve. They taught me how to communicate, listen actively, and, have a sense of empathy and just being there for others. That program taught me a lot over the summer, and I'm very grateful that I was a part of it. Actually, being a part, since I'm a pre-leader in Urban, they gave me the opportunity to be a part of it. They sent over, the opportunity, and since I got hired quickly to be a youth restorative justice leader. So, yeah.
And if I could follow up, Gizzelle, I remember you gave a story when we were talking a little bit about having to do customer service and how some of these concepts helped you solve problems with customers who may not have been respectful as they should have. Would you like to share that with Karen with regards to how you navigate some of those challenges?
Yeah, so I also have a part-time job. I'm a cashier, and when certain customers, aren't having a good day, my manager just, pulls me to the side and kind of just does a quick one-on-one with me to basically just communicate and see my point of view and help me see the other customer's point of view. So I kind of put myself in their shoes and kind of collaborate with them and kind of see, what, instead of arguing or instead of, going back and forth, I kind of just see what kind of solution can we come up with. And yeah, my manager really helps me a lot with that. He just puts me to the side and kind of just asks me, what's the problem? What solution can we use? And
Great. As we're doing this work at the Readiness Projects, we often use this phrase, and you've been saying this so well, that we really need to engage and inspire all adults in all settings to really support all learners with these different kinds of approaches, with very different approaches, not just the formal classroom instruction, but the other kinds of approaches to learning and meaning making that you all have been talking about. And and as I think about that and I sort of push it forward, I'm really wondering, David, if we can come back to this really pressing both question about equity, but in particular what seems to be this lingering tension between whether the best thing we need to be doing to support our Black and brown students is drilling down on academics, or really should it be social and emotional learning, or should it be real life experience? Why are these things seen as in opposition to each other? And talk about how you're really sort of working to make sure that they're blending all together. Because my understanding is that the students who are coming out of your schools are prepared for everything. They are socially, emotionally, cognitively, academically competent, and they are, sort of community savvy. So they're coming out with everything. How are you putting it together, and how do you explain it to people? And then Gizzelle, you've just been talking so much about how all of these things fit together, but I'm both frustrated and perplexed that we seem to not be able, when we talk about schools, to have this not be an either-or conversation.
Well, first, Karen, I would like to say on the record that I would put an Urban Assembly graduate against any graduate in any high school across the country with regards to our young people's ability to solve problems. And that means in the social and emotional space, it means in the cognitive space. A problem is a problem. And just because it doesn't have an equal sign attached to the end of it doesn't mean that we can't develop our young people to problem solve through that. So I'm very proud of Gizzelle. Very proud of the work that's happening over at Collaborative Healthcare, because the more we invest in our young people to enter into the world in the way that Gizzelle has described, the better our communities and our society will be. Now let me move to your next question around why is this so difficult to reproduce at scale? First, I will say that one of the key pieces that we're doing at the Urban Assembly is working to reproduce some of these concepts at scale. And that means serving as proof of concepts for other school districts, other organizations across the country, that it is possible. At the Urban Assembly, we're working in district schools, public schools. They're not charter schools. They are working in the same constraints that other district schools are working in. And we're moving from what problems to how problems. And I want to just say this again, because the problems that we're facing in public education, how do we integrate academics, social and emotional development, and career readiness? Those are not what problems. There is enough white pages written on them. There are enough people who have sat in panels and said this is what should be happening. But there are not enough people who are taking that what and trying to facilitate the actual systems and structures to get this working. And I'm not saying we're perfect. But I am saying that I have a young person here today, Gizzelle, who's able to articulate our vision and our mission in a way that makes me very proud. And so I think if we take more time, and there are more institutions who are really in schools, who are connected to schools, who spend every day trying to think about, we've got 8 periods, how do we organize these 8 periods in ways that integrate these outcomes, then we'll be moving further, faster for our young people, and our society will benefit for the outcomes of that.
Well, I want to hear more about how you're taking this out of New York City and across the country, because I think that's critical. And, whether it's Urban Assembly or it's EL Education or it's Turnaround, these organizations that really have sort of doubled down to be those proof points, we now need you to figure out how you don't do it one school at a time, but how you do it one city at a time, so we can really get there faster. So I want to hear more about that. But I want to come back to just this tension a little bit longer and put it in the context of COVID, because I know you're making some decisions in this space. I know before you became CEO, which I'm delighted that you are, of Urban Assembly, your title was Director of SEL. And SEL is one of those concepts that people love or hate, more the acronym than the idea. When Gizzelle has just described, spending the summer really thinking about how to increase her empathy skills and her problem-solving skills and how to be a part of a team and how to communicate, nobody's going to argue with that and say, well, that's not what she should be doing. But somehow, when we boil all that down and say, we need to teach kids SEL, and even say, and we need to actually screen them and assess them on SEL, we start to move into some controversial waters. And I know that's a place where you spend a lot of time thinking and where you're doing some work. So if we're going to really talk about how we integrate social and emotional and cognitive and academic, how do we talk about how to help young people really know where they are on that path of building those skills in a way that really is supportive of them and doesn't feel like more tests being put on black and brown kids that they're going to fail?
Well, first, Karen, if there's controversy and I'm not in the middle of it, something is wrong. So I appreciate the opportunity to take this opportunity to speak around some of the work that we're doing and how we're doing it. I will say that the Strong Resilient NYC initiative that's being led in New York City, in which all students will have an opportunity to get feedback on their social and emotional development, is an initiative that is being led in part by the Urban Assembly with regards to making sure all 1,600 schools and 1.1 million students have some sort of feedback on their social and emotional competence. Now, what does that feedback look like and why is this important? Well, we know in the context of education that the number one driver for development, for achievement, is the quality of feedback. Right? We know this from Hattie's research. We know this from watching teachers. We know this from the overall understanding of the educational outcomes. And if we're going to take social and emotional learning seriously, if we're going to sit with young people like Gizzelle and say, we want you to graduate college, career, and community ready, we all need to be like her manager. We need to be able to take her aside and say, hey, I saw the way that you solved that problem. I'm wondering if next time you can do this. Right? I'm wondering if next time you can think about this. And so the goal of this assessment is to create a language, to create some clarity. You heard Gizzelle talk about problem solving, empathy, communication. These are constructs that we have developed through the notions of assessment, through feedback, and through direct instruction. And so our vision for this work is that we have more students like Gizzelle who go out in the world, who are cognizant, who are clear about their social and emotional skills of herself and others, and then use these skills to solve problems. Right? Because we all know there's enough problems to solve. There are enough challenges in this world that the more folks who are able to see those challenges and then bring themselves to those solution sets, the better we're going to be. So with regards to that controversy, I think when we are labeling kids, when we're putting kids in categories, when we're saying you're good or you're bad, those are things that are constraining kids' growth. When we're giving feedback to kids and saying, here are ways that you can solve this problem in a better way, and then giving them opportunities and experiences to practice. Because I want to say this again, the work-based learning, the internships, the work that Gizzelle is doing in terms of restorative practice, these are part and parcel of her social and emotional development. It's not just about an assessment, right? It's about how are you living these things out. So I think the better we are to moving to those outcomes, the better our city will be. And the better our city will be, hopefully the better folks will be in terms of looking to our city for inspiration.
I appreciate that clarification, and I knew you would give it, and I wanted to get it on record, because what you said and the way you said it about feedback to get better at problem solving, any kind of problem, social, emotional, math, real life, that's what we want. And that's clearly when you interview and survey parents, it's what they want. But there is concern around just the term. This condensed SEL acronym. When parents are surveyed and asked, do you want SEL taught in your schools? There's a concern that it's one more thing that you're going to teach that you don't really understand our kids, but now you're going to teach them these skills, and then you're going to come back and tell me they're not doing it well. There is that concern. There's also just confusion. It's much easier to do exactly what you said and exactly what Gizzelle did, to say, this is what we're talking about. Empathy and teamwork and time management and problem solving, those are the things we're talking about. That's the language that parents use. So when parents are surveyed and they're asked, what are the skills and competencies you want your young people to have, and where do you think they build them, they very naturally talk about what you just said and talk about the importance of opportunities to practice in non-graded real-life settings where you're doing something you're interested in and that seems to be meaningful. That's easy. They just happen to call them life skills. And so I think a part of this that we want to draw you into is if we're really going to have a movement around this integration, we do need to use the language that young people use and use the language that parents use in order to really get this out there and not have resistance. And I think that's especially true. Your words around feedback as opposed to assessment, that language is really important. And I see Gizzelle nodding her head. Do you feel like you were having these sort of things looked at and assessed to give you feedback for you to own how to get them stronger and better? Or did you ever feel like you were being graded on these skills?
Well, at the Urban Assembly School, I don't ever feel like that, which I'm very grateful for. As I mentioned before, I was a part of a program this summer, and I had the opportunity to speak with New York senators over the summer. And when I spoke with them, I was protesting against the zero tolerance policies. When speaking with them, I was protesting against passing that rule, passing that law, because that policy is not fair to Black and brown students in our communities at all. So when I was fighting against them and, stating my claim as to why that rule should not be passed on to our schools, I was on behalf of my Black and brown students, because it's not fair as to how they would quickly suspend somebody based on no context at all. So when speaking with them, I just kept on giving examples on how would they feel as if their child was, treated with that same policy, with like no context behind what was being done, and with no words being spoken from the students. And over the summer when I did this with the New York senators, I spoke with, I believe, I want to say 4 different senators, and all of them did not pass the rule, which I'm happy that they didn't. So, yeah.
And Karen, if I can just take a second to speak to Gizelle's experience here, right? Our public education spaces are really our society's investment into developing the kind of young people that are going to contribute upon graduation, right? So it's like this little microcosm of society. To Gizelle's point, right, what we are teaching our young people around how problems are solved, right? Are people engaged? Is it a zero tolerance, or is it or as an approach that's designed to reintegrate young people back into the community? These are questions about not just our schools, but our society writ large, right? And so I recognize and I hear some of the concerns that we're having around the language, around social and emotional learning. But I think when you talk to our students, and Gizzelle is here, we're talking about things like conflict resolution. We're talking about things like managing our emotions towards a goal. And we're talking about things like relationship skills. And so I'd like us to continue to focus on those skills, those competencies, those attitudes that allow our young people to contribute to our society and move it forward. So I think it's a really good example here of how communication skills allowed her to not only argue from the perspective, and I heard her say state a claim, right? Which is, again, that's clarity of language that creates constructs. And that claim helped her to advocate on behalf of our Black and brown kids.
I'm 100% with you, David, and pushing you because I know how important these skill building experiences are, how important practicing them in real settings in which it matters, in which your voice matters are, how important it is to be able to get feedback when you don't do it well. All of those are critically important. And somehow, as you're scaling the success that you've had across the country, I'm assuming that you're leading with those kind of examples of what we should be building for young people. And I just want to make sure that as we're having those conversations, and we're having the conversation about what kind of role all adults can play, if they're in any kind of intentional relationship with young people, both modeling and naming and encouraging that these skills be practiced and bringing in feedback. You've talked about how this is really happening for all of your students. And that's not happening across the country. So as you think about bringing this model out, just talk for a few minutes, because I know we're going to wrap up soon. How are you taking this to scale as you move beyond New York City, where you actually get to walk in and out of buildings and you're trying to take it across the country? How do you get these ideas across in ways that they really create the experiences that are comparable to the kind that Gizzelle and her classmates have had?
Well, I appreciate the question, Karen. I think the first thing that I would say is that we have tools that help to translate these ideas into actual practices. So if we think about the definition of a tool, it's something that makes something easier, right? Homo sapien tool making. One of the big challenges in the context of social and emotional learning, as you know, is that there's a lack of clarity, right? Is it about being nice to people? Maybe. Or is it about developing relationships? Well, it's probably a little bit of both, right? Being nice helps develop relationships. Using effective communication skills helps you to create your intent, right? To move towards what you're trying to accomplish. Being able to solve problems helps us be more constructive in community. So the first thing that we look to do as we move this is create clarity in terms of what we mean. So we have a list of 11 to 14 social and emotional competencies. Students demonstrate the ability to manage their emotions. Students demonstrate awareness of their needs and emotions that are also linked to adult competencies that allow adults to model these, to activate these opportunities, as well as create experiences for students to demonstrate these skills. Additionally to that, we envision social emotional learning in the really broad sense of what learning is, right? Learning is the ability to integrate understandings and knowledge and shift behaviors. So that means social and emotional learning is giving students an opportunity to learn through instruction, learn through extracurricular, learn through behavior supports, learn through adult modeling, how to understand and problem solve around these concepts. So in a nutshell, right, I would say the number one thing that we bring to the space is clarity. We're not going to come in and say, I want your student to be more self-aware. We're going to say, let's make sure that students have an understanding of how to access external supports. And now how do we create a school community in which students have clarity around their external supports and how they can use them to solve problems? And Gizzelle talked about this a little bit before. She said, adults around me help me to solve problems. I know that I can go to adults to solve some of the problems that I need to. And the last thing I'll say on this is we're not going to create dependency, right? So we don't tell our students to go to adults for everything. We have adults scaffold the problem-solving sequence for young people so that they're better able to do it for themselves. And you'll see this in Gizzelle when you're talking about 9th graders working with 12th graders, right? We start with the adults. They build the capacity, the capabilities of the 12th graders, who then build the capabilities and capacities of 9th graders, so that we have graduated students who are ready to solve the problems of the world, not just the problems of the school building that they're a part of.
Once again, David, you've just demonstrated the power of being able to explain what we're really trying to do and what we're really trying to do with all adults. Gizzelle, I'd love to hear a little bit about that modeling from seniors down to 9th graders. Can you just talk about that experience from either side, what it was like to be a 9th or 10th grader and have this modeling, and what it's been like now that you're a senior?
Yeah, so being a part of the pre-leader program, when I came in as a freshman, I was taught from a senior, and they came into my advisory and they spoke about different lessons. The lessons were, it was a variety of different things we'll speak about. So when I was a freshman, I would look up to these peer leaders and I would see them as, somebody who could hold their own, and someone who, being a senior, you're still fairly young, but when you're a peer leader, you just have different skills and concepts that you are more elevated than other students. So when I was a freshman, I would look up to these peer leaders coming into my advisory, and I would be like, I want to be like them. The way they are able to communicate, the way they're able to hold a conversation, the way they're able to hold a circle. And, when to be a peer leader, you have to be a sophomore. So as soon as my sophomore year came around, I was the first one to sign up to be a part of the peer leader program. So I've been a part of it since sophomore year, and I'm a senior, and now that I'm able to, pitch into different advisories, now I teach other freshmen. And when speaking with them, I'm doing the same thing that I was taught when I was a freshman. I'm just teaching them how to being able to, hold their own. I'm embedding in their heads different advice. That way they're able to, create their own path through their high school career, and in way they're able to be dependent on themselves and not others, and the way they're able to, treat their mental health with bare, attention and not avoid that, because mental health is a big thing that I would talk about, because mental health is very important. So, yeah.
Wonderful example. Well, I know we want to make sure we have time to do some uploading off of the computers. So I'm just going to ask either of you, any last things that you really hoped you had wanted to say on this interview that we didn't get to?
Well, listen, I'm super proud of Giselle. I know that we took her out of her school day, and I saw her recently as we prepared for this. I just want to say, Giselle, that the future is yours, right? My legacy, hopefully, is creating spaces for more students like you to bring your voice to solve the problems that we need to solve. And feel free to reach out to us if there's anything else that we can do to support you in your future.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
And Giselle, we certainly look to see where you go next and want to continue to hear from you. And David, I think my job is just to continue to amplify the work that you're doing so that the country knows it. You explain it so well. And Giselle, you exemplify it so well. So thanks to both of you. And I